Seth McLaughlin, Locked On College Football, NC State. So there's talks of this, like NC State and North Carolina, are they tied together? The way that I read the state legislature's verbiage is they are enforcing the two teams to play annually, no matter what. It's kind of like almost a no matter what clause, and like ECU's thrown in there. And
they've got to play other teams in the state to make sure that, they get the tourism and kind of local economic bump that comes from a major sporting event, especially football, basketball, men's and women's basketball.
What I find so interesting about that is in this kind of quasi-state clause they put together, they mention NC State, North Carolina, ensuring they play every year, almost as if it's not guaranteed for the rest of time. Mm-hmm. I find it interesting that now even state legislatures are looking at conference realignment and going, oh, let's get on the front end of this and make sure these two teams play every year no matter what. Do I think there is somebody inside the weeds in North Carolina in their state representatives like, oh, I know North Carolina's leaving the conference, I'm going to make this happen? I don't believe that's the case currently. However, as North Carolina, the prominent brand, seems so confident that Florida State and Clemson leave that they could get a Big Ten invite or an SEC invite, the question becomes for me, is NC State a Big 12 caliber program, or does this conference go for a Louisville, Pitt, Georgia Tech, if Miami's on the table, or Virginia Tech? Is NC State left off the board altogether for the Big 12 if expansion through the ACC is what happens?
Well, that would depend on the priorities of Brett Yormark and how he would view potential expansion with ACC teams, because if you're telling me I can only have 2 out of 3 of NC State, Louisville, and Pitt, which criteria are you prioritizing the most? You can make the case for whatever you would like. And
well, revenue-wise, I think Pitt and I would say both Pitt and Louisville put themselves above EADA numbers, especially above NC State enough where you say, hey, if we're talking just the dollar sign, I'm not sure if NC State is a part of that list.
The question...
It's got to be the dollar sign, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Football also generates a lot of dollar signs. Right. And if you're asking me which of those football programs I would most want to have, Pitt is third. Yeah. And you can argue whichever one you would like between NC State and Louisville. But Pitt is third. There is no doubt in my mind about that. Not that they aren't a fully capable program. We have seen them succeed.
Considering the backyard brawl.
And again, that's where priorities come into play. Because is it that important? Is it that valuable? Is Pitt, West Virginia, which is certainly one of the most underrated rivalries in all of college football that everyone should be aware of. It is utterly fantastic. You have just pure, unbridled disdain between those fan bases, which is exactly the way it should be to form a great rivalry in college sports. Is that game, just the football game? I mean, I'm sure that rivalry exists in other sports as well, but is that one football game more valuable than bringing in a program that you feel is stronger and capable of contending in your league? Like, which of those 3 programs, at least not just in 2024, but on a rolling annual basis, do you feel is most poised to contend in the Big 12 regularly or have a chance to? I have seen Louisville's head coach play in a conference title game in 2 separate seasons, back-to-back at 2 separate schools. Yeah. So I know that he can do it. I have watched NC State come on the precipice year after year of winning 10 games. They haven't done it yet. They could absolutely do it this year, but they have established one of the highest floors for a football program in the ACC outside of the big boys, Florida State and Clemson. Even FSU has bottomed out in a way that NC State just really hasn't on a consistent basis. So I think those considerations all come into play. And Brett Yormark, I think you can really justify it any way that you would like. I mean, it might come down to which school makes the best pitch. Hey, we're gonna, bring X, Y, and Z to the table, or we'll take X amount of a full media rights share. Like they're asking for 100%. We'll take 50%. We feel okay with that. We got some donors lined up that can fund our athletics part. We feel like that's okay. It could come down to something like that, because if you're the Big 12 and you can only have 2, look, I'm a sucker for you got to build the best football conference that you possibly can. I would go with Louisville and NC State. That's just me personally. I really like their programs. I like their head coaches. But if I'm going for 4, then I would incorporate Pitt to have the backyard brawl within the Big 12 conference and it being a league game. And then your next option, probably Virginia Tech. Yeah. Like if you were to go for 4, I think those would be your top 4 options out of the ACC in some order. I can make a case Louisville would be number 1.
Do you? I would make the case myself that Louisville's number 1. They are a top 25 EADA athletic revenue school the last 20 years, and they weren't a power conference team for all 20 of those years. They bring in money in general. The Dukes, okay, Duke, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech. Are we leaving those confidently behind NC State? Or is there a case for those 3 schools that if you want to be relevant in football, you would take any of them over the Wolfpack?
I don't think you would take any of them over the Wolfpack, no. I think, Manny Diaz has got an opportunity to, prove that he's a capable head coach. He wasn't bad at Miami. I think he could actually do a pretty solid job at Duke if he's able to bring in enough talent in the coming years, which is, not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that is an if for the school up there in Durham. But I think that for Georgia Tech, I just haven't seen it enough recently. And yeah, part of that might be recency bias. I remember the Paul Johnson days. I remember Georgia Tech playing in BCS games.
Think about that. Can we 10 years ago, I asked you, would you rather have Clemson or Georgia Tech in your conference? You're taking Georgia Tech every day of the week.
Clemson was still really good 10 years ago. Clemson 2014 Clemson
in like 20. That's wow.
2014. Yeah.
2021 anymore.
Yeah. See, 2014 was 10 years ago. So 2014 Clemson. What 2014 Clemson is just a couple years away from winning a national championship. Yeah. How about that? Go figure.
15 years ago. Like recency bias, because I talked for a long time about brand power historically. That's not as big of a thing as brand power for the last 15 years is. That's why Miami 15 years ago and Georgia Tech probably too are a shoe-in above Clemson. Today, that very obviously isn't. It's not
correct.
The case. So,
correct. And it's the blue blood discussion in college football. Who's a blue blood? Who's the is very different because if you're talking like old school,
look at Nebraska, Tennessee,
Nebraska, Nebraska would be a blue blood. Would anyone consider Nebraska one of the major powers in college football right now? Because last I checked, they're trying to make a bowl game for the first time since 2016,
17,
6. Yeah, I was gonna say 16. I think it is 16. Could have that wrong. I could Maybe Google 18, it real quick, possibly. Or I could just take a generic shot at Nebraska for absolutely no reason. Like either one of the two. But
Matt Rule.
Yeah, I think Nebraska's a good team this year. They'll make a bowl game this year. Nebraska will, at the very least, make a bowl game this year. Book that down, and Dylan Raiola will be one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, which is not exactly a high bar, especially compared to the Big 12 conference, by the way, which is, by my account, probably the deepest conference of quarterbacks in the country. The SEC might have more guys at the high end that are like NFL potential, but also if you go, I think the Big 12 goes like 8 deep at quarterbacks. I don't think the SEC goes 8 deep. They've got too many unproven freshmen like Nico Iamaleava, or first-year starters like Nico Iamaleava and Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma, for instance, amongst others. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, or Brock Vandegrift at Kentucky. You're like, I don't really know what those guys are. I have a bunch of guys in the Big 12. I have a bunch of guys in the Big 12 that I know what they are.
In the end, NC State would be a great addition to the Big 12. I see what you're saying. I think you're hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be a home run addition there. Like if I had my choice to pick 2 of 3 between Pitt, Louisville, and NC State, as great as the backyard brawl is, I would go NC State and Louisville. I really would, because I think that market is. I haven't looked at the television market ratings recently. I just think that NC State's a really solid play. Plus, athletically, NC State is red hot right now. Men's Final Four, women's Final Four, football team, ACC title aspirations, and their baseball team just went to the College World Series.
Baseball World Series, yep, unreal. Spencer, where can listeners of Locked On Big 12 who seem to like you now find more of your work?
Well, I wonder why that is. You can find me on Locked On College Football and Locked On Ducks Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Anywhere you get this show that you're consuming right now, you can find my shows as well. And I believe there are at least a handful of crossover viewers, maybe some listeners out there as well. And we appreciate you all so very, very much. But if you haven't checked out Locked On College Football, biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, if you listen to that show or watch that show every day, you will be so well informed. I have more information in my head than I forgot over a 10-year period of time with regards to college football.
I'll see you guys on Monday. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.